Today we're diving into A Christmas Story from 1983, the holiday classic about young Ralphie Parker and his quest for a Red Ryder BB gun. This movie was actually a box office flop that bombed in theaters, but it became one of the most beloved Christmas movies ever thanks to TV marathons. Get ready for some shocking behind-the-scenes stories that will blow your mind. Fact 1.
Chile. It must be Italian.
A Christmas Story was actually a huge disappointment when it first came out. The movie opened 1 week before Thanksgiving in 1983 and only made about $2 million in its first weekend. By Christmas that year, it was already gone from most theaters and only stayed in about 100 locations until January. The final box office total was just over $19 million, which was considered pretty bad for a major studio release. Critics were divided about the movie, and many dismissed it because director Bob Clark had just made Porky's, which critics hated. Gene Siskel actually called the film delightful, but said it was doomed to box office failure because it came out too early in the holiday season. The studio considered it a total flop and quickly moved on. Nobody could have predicted that this forgotten failure would become one of the most watched Christmas movies in history. It took years of TV airings before people discovered how special it was. The movie that almost nobody saw in theaters is now watched by tens of millions every Christmas. Sometimes the best things in life need a second chance to shine. Fact 2. Scott Schwartz, the actor who played Flick in the tongue-stuck-to-flagpole scene, once watched basketball legend Michael Jordan perfectly recreate the entire scene in the Chicago Bulls locker room. Schwartz said Jordan was absolutely perfect and dead on with every detail. He described feeling lit up like a Christmas tree inside watching one of the greatest athletes of all time act out his most famous movie moment. The flagpole scene itself has become so iconic that Schwartz gets calls from reporters every single year about kids who actually tried it and got their tongues stuck to frozen poles. His response is always the same. Yeah, he's a schmuck. The scene was filmed using a hidden suction tube that was basically like a mini vacuum cleaner with a hole about the size of a pinky nail. The tube was hidden in plastic that covered the flagpole and created gentle suction that kept Schwartz's tongue attached without hurting him. Sometimes during filming, his tongue would pop off when he pulled too hard, but it never caused any pain. The worst part wasn't the suction, but the bitter cold they had to film in for 2 days. There's even a bronze statue in Hammond, Indiana showing Flick with his tongue stuck to the pole, immortalizing the scene forever. Fact 3. Zach Ward, who played the terrifying bully Scut Farkas with yellow eyes, was actually cast to play the tiny sidekick Grover Dill. Ward auditioned against about 300 kids in a cattle call casting. They kept narrowing it down from 300 to 200 to 100 and started recording kids on VHS tapes, which was new technology back then. Ward beat out hundreds of other red-headed kids and finally got the role of Grover Dill, the short little toady who follows Scut around. But when Ward showed up on the Cleveland set for the first day of filming, director Bob Clark saw him standing next to Yano Anaya, who was supposed to play Scut. Ward was about 8 inches taller than Anaya. Clark looked at the two boys, paused for a moment, and simply said, "Okay, you two switch places, you get his lines, and he gets yours." Just like that, Ward went from being the sidekick to playing one of cinema's most memorable bullies. Clark wanted to keep the bullies separated from the other kids on set to maintain natural intimidation, and it worked because Ward was much taller than everyone else. Ward's character, Scut Farkas, later became the inspiration for Scott Tenorman on South Park. Fact 4. Director Bob Clark heard Gene Shepard tell the story of Flick and the frozen flagpole on the radio in 1968, and it changed his life. Clark was driving to pick up a date when Shepard came on the radio telling the story about a boy who got triple dog dared to stick his tongue to a frozen flagpole. Clark had never heard anyone tell a story that way before. He was so completely absorbed in listening to Shepard's unique storytelling style that he completely lost track of time. When Clark finally arrived to pick up his date, he was 45 minutes late. According to the story told at the Christmas Story House Museum, Clark resolved right then and there to make a movie based on Shepard's work. It took him 12 years to actually make it happen, but he never gave up on his dream. Shepard's distinctive narrative voice became the adult Ralphie narrating the entire film, and that storytelling style later influenced shows like The Wonder Years. Clark told reporters during filming that it had taken him a considerable number of years to get the film into production, but his dedication paid off, even though he didn't live to see just how beloved it would become. Fact 5. When young Ralphie says, "Oh fudge," after dropping the hubcap bolts, he actually said the real F word during filming. Peter Billingsley revealed in the DVD commentary that they filmed the scene both ways to get the right mouth movements, and he actually spoke the full F word that the narrator calls the queen mother of dirty words. They shot it multiple ways so his mouth would move correctly but cut away before you could see him complete the word. Billingsley and director Bob Clark discussed the scene at great length before filming it. They wanted to make absolutely sure his facial expression and mouth movements looked authentic for someone who just blurted out that word. In the final version, you can clearly see Ralphie's shocked expression after he says it, because he was actually actually saying the real curse word during filming. The soap punishment that follows was filmed with a bar of wax instead of real soap because the production couldn't afford actual Lifebuoy soap. Director Clark specifically chose Lifebuoy because he remembered from his own childhood that it tasted absolutely terrible. Billingsley's acting during the soap scene was so convincing that everyone believed he really had soap in his mouth. Fact 6.
Chef's theme, trusty old Red Ryder carbine action 2 on the shot.
During the Black Bart fantasy sequence where Ralphie imagines himself as a sheriff, the prop master made a catastrophic mistake that made Peter Billingsley seriously ill. The script called for Ralphie to chew tobacco in his sheriff costume, and the prop master gave young Billingsley actual red man chewing tobacco instead of a fake substitute. Billingsley was only 12 years old and had no idea what he was doing with real chewing tobacco. The prop man told him to jam it down in his cheek and just spit, making sure not to swallow. Billingsley did exactly as instructed, but about 15 minutes into filming, the world started tilting around him. He began sweating profusely, his stomach started hurting really badly, and then he started violently throwing up. The nicotine from the real tobacco made him incredibly sick because he was just a kid who had never used tobacco before. Billingsley explained the whole disaster on that scene with Dan Patrick years later, saying the prop department totally screwed up by giving a child actor real tobacco. The scene eventually got filmed successfully, but only after they found a safe fake substitute. This dangerous mistake is a reminder that child safety regulations on sets exist for very good reasons. Fact 7.
Something had happened, and I had gone out of my...
The famous fight scene where Ralphie beats up Scut Farkus looked brutal for a good reason. Zach Ward was actually getting slapped hard in the face. While Peter Billingsley's punches didn't really hit Ward, the mittens hanging from idiot strings off Billingsley's wrists were frozen solid and kept smacking Ward right in the face. Ward explained that the mittens were leather, had been soaked from the snow, and then frozen again. Getting hit with them was exactly like being slapped in the face with frozen pork cutlets over and over. When you watch the scene and see Ward's cheeks turning bright red, that's not makeup or acting. That's his face genuinely red from being slapped repeatedly by frozen mittens during multiple takes. Ward remembers the pain clearly to this day. Director Bob Clark wanted to keep the bullies separated from the lead kids on set so there would be natural intimidation, and Ward says that strategy worked because he was about 8 inches taller than everyone else. Ward's favorite part of playing Scut Farkus is when Ralphie's mom pulls him off and reveals that Scut is just a crying kid with a bloody nose, taking the mask off and showing he's just human and not actually scary anymore. Fact 8. The beautiful snow covering Cleveland during filming was actually made from a combination of soap suds and carcinogenic firefighting foam that has since been banned. It didn't snow in Cleveland while they were filming, so the production crew had to manufacture all the winter wonderland scenery. The crew ran massive snow machines all night long with permission from neighbors on the street where the Parker house was located, so everything would look like a fresh winter morning. The now banned firefighting foam they used contained chemicals that are known carcinogens, meaning they can cause cancer. Modern film productions would never be allowed to use anything like this today because of health and safety regulations. The toxic foam was mixed with soap and pumped through wind machines to create realistic-looking snowdrifts and falling snow. The production spent roughly 24 hours creating the winter wonderland we see on screen using this dangerous mixture. Tour guides at the Christmas Story House Museum share this disturbing fact with visitors, and everyone is always shocked to learn that the beautiful snow was actually toxic chemicals. This was common practice in old Hollywood before people fully understood how dangerous these substances were. Today's filmmakers use much safer materials to create fake snow. Fact 9.
Get out of here. Go on. Get out of here. Go on home, you meat.
In 2004, a Navy veteran named Brian Jones bought the actual Parker house from the movie site Unseen on eBay for $150,000. Jones was living in California and ran a successful business selling replica leg lamps when his wife, who was deployed in the Middle East, emailed him that her captain had noticed the house was for sale on eBay. She jokingly told him he should buy it, and Jones actually did it immediately. Jones offered the seller $150,000 on the spot if he would end the auction right away. The seller agreed, and suddenly Jones owned the famous Christmas Story house without ever seeing it in person. When he finally visited Cleveland and saw the house, he was in complete shock. Houses on that street were selling for around $25,000, so he had vastly overpaid based on local real estate values. But the historic 1895 Victorian house had been converted to a duplex with vinyl siding and needed massive restoration work. Jones spent an additional $240,000 gutting the structure and restoring it to look exactly like it did in the movie. He watched the film frame by frame to create detailed plans of the interior, which had originally been filmed on a Toronto soundstage. The house and museum opened in 2006 and now draws tens of thousands of visitors annually from around the world. Fact 10.
Fragile. It must be Italian.
I think that's just fragile, honey.
The legendary Jack Nicholson was seriously considered for the role of Ralphie's father, the Old Man. Director Bob Clark mentioned in the DVD commentary that Nicholson was on the list of actors being considered for the part. Just imagine Jack Nicholson yelling about the leg lamp being a major award or fighting with the furnace. The entire movie would have had a completely different energy with Nicholson's intense personality. Clark expressed enormous gratitude that he ended up casting Darren McGavin instead. McGavin brought the perfect mix of grumpiness and hidden warmth that made the Old Man such a lovable character. McGavin was best known at the time for playing a quirky reporter in the TV series Kolchak. He brought that same eccentric energy to the role. James Broderick had played the Old Man in earlier TV versions of Gene Shepard's stories, but he died the year before A Christmas Story was made. McGavin's improvisational genius shines through in scenes like his profanity-filled rants at the furnace. He spoke complete gibberish instead of actual curse words to keep the PG rating intact. McGavin later appeared in several other Bob Clark films, and the two developed a great working relationship. Fact 11? The famous 24-hour marathon of A Christmas Story that plays 12 times straight from Christmas Eve through Christmas Day started in 1997 on TNT. Before that, Turner Broadcasting had been airing the film increasingly on their networks, TBS, TNT, and TCM, starting in 1991. By 1995, they aired it 6 times over December 24th through 26th. And those viewings were so successful that in 1996 they increased it to 8 separate broadcasts. In 1997, due to the movie's ever-increasing popularity and rising merchandise sales, TNT created the official 24 Hours of A Christmas Story marathon beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern on Christmas Eve. In 2004, when TNT switched to predominantly drama programming, TBS took over the marathon. It was estimated that in 2002, about 38.4 million people tuned in at some point. By 2008, that number had grown to 54.4 million viewers. The film was so insanely popular that in 2014, Turner decided to broadcast the marathons on both TBS and TNT simultaneously. They staggered the showings 1 hour apart, so you wouldn't see the same exact scene on both channels at the same time. In 2019, 13 out of the top 25 most watched programs on cable Christmas Day were A Christmas Story. The marathon has become as much a Christmas tradition as decorating trees. Fact 12. The iconic tongue-stuck-to-flagpole scene had to be filmed twice because a Toronto film lab made a catastrophic technical error. After spending 2 days filming the difficult scene in bitter cold weather with Scott Schwartz's tongue suctioned to the pole, director Bob Clark reviewed the developed footage and discovered the lab had underdeveloped the film. The footage was ruined and completely unusable. This was back when movies were shot on actual film that had to be physically developed, and if there was an error during development, you lost everything. Clark had to go to young Schwartz and deliver the bad news. I have good news and bad news. The good news is you're here an extra 3 days. The bad news is we have to go back and do it again. Schwartz had to spend another entire day with his tongue stuck to the frozen flagpole, repeating the same uncomfortable scene. Peter Billingsley explained that this kind of disaster happened with film technology, and there was no backup if something went wrong during development. Schwartz took the news relatively well, though spending another day stuck to a freezing flagpole couldn't have been fun. At least the second time around, he knew exactly what to expect and how the suction device worked. Fact 13. In 2012, the Library of Congress selected A Christmas Story for preservation in the National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. This is a huge honor that recognizes the film as an important part of American cultural heritage. The National Film Registry was established by Congress in 1989 to spotlight the importance of preserving America's film heritage. Each year, the Librarian of Congress names 25 films to the registry that are at least 10 years old and represent enduring importance to American culture. The films are not selected as the best American films of all time, but rather as works that reflect who we are as a people and as a nation. A Christmas Story was inducted alongside other classics like Breakfast at Tiffany's, Dirty Harry, The Matrix, and A League of Their Own in the 2012 class. The Library of Congress Packard Campus for Audiovisual Conservation now works to ensure the film is preserved for future generations through special archiving programs. This recognition came 29 years after the film was initially dismissed as a box office failure. It's remarkable that a movie that bombed in theaters and was forgotten for years is now officially recognized as a culturally significant masterpiece worth preserving forever. Fact 14. John Shepherd, who wrote the stories and narrated the film, was actually barred from the set by director Bob Clark during filming. While shooting scenes in Cleveland and Toronto in early 1983, Clark told reporters it had taken him considerable years to get the film into production. Clark and Shepherd did not get along well at all during production. Clark did not appreciate Shepherd's attempts to guide the actors with ideas about how characters should be played. Shepherd envisioned his stories as Dickens's Christmas Carol as retold by Scrooge, but Clark wanted to soften the material for the film version. The creative differences got so bad that Clark had Shepherd banned from being on set around the actors. Despite this conflict, Shepherd still appears briefly in the film as the irate man who directs Ralphie and Randy to the back of the Santa line at the department store. His real wife, Lee Brown, also appears in that scene as the woman standing behind him in line. Clark also plays a small role as Swede, the neighbor that the old man brags to about his major award leg lamp. Despite the behind-the-scenes tension, Shepherd's distinctive narration as adult Ralphie became one of the film's most beloved elements and defined its unique storytelling style. Fact 15. The seemingly improvised nonsensical curses that Ralphie screams while beating up Scut Farkus were actually scripted word for word. According to Peter Billingsley in the DVD commentary, every single bizarre phrase Ralphie yells during his rage-filled attack was carefully written in the screenplay ahead of time. Nothing was improvised or made up on the spot by young Billingsley. The scene where Ralphie finally snaps after Scut throws a snowball in his face is one of the most memorable moments in the film. Ralphie goes into a blind rage, pins Scut to the ground, and starts swearing while throwing punches as a huge crowd of kids gathers to watch. The stream of profanity sounds authentic because Billingsley delivered the lines exactly as written with perfect emotional intensity. Even though we can't make out all the specific words he's yelling, each curse word was precisely scripted by the writers. This attention to detail shows how carefully crafted the film was. Similarly, when Darren McGavin's character fights with the furnace and spews gibberish profanity, McGavin ad-libbed those rants to keep a PG rating since it was almost impossible to ad-lib angry words without actual profanity. But Ralphie's beat-down curse words were all planned out in advance. Fact 16. A Christmas Story won 2 Canadian Genie Awards in 1984, recognizing it as an outstanding achievement in Canadian cinema. The film won awards for Bob Clark's direction and for Best Screenplay. This makes sense because significant portions of the movie were filmed in Canada, specifically in Toronto and St. Catharines, Ontario. The interior shots of the Parker house were filmed on a soundstage in Toronto, and several outdoor scenes, including Ralphie's fight with Scut Farkus, were shot in Canadian locations. The Genie Awards are Canada's equivalent of the Oscars, recognizing excellence in Canadian film production. These were the only major awards the film won initially, since American award ceremonies completely overlooked it. The movie was produced partly in Canada, making it eligible for the Genies. The recognition from Canadian film industry was actually more enthusiastic than the American response at first. The school scenes were filmed at Victoria School in St. Catharines, which was later sold to developers in 2005 and remodeled into a women's shelter. The Christmas tree purchasing scene was filmed in Toronto because it was the only location that still used red PCC streetcars. St. Catharines Museum now owns several props from the film, including 2 pairs of Ralphie's glasses and 2 scripts. Canadian involvement was essential to making this American classic. Fact 17. Director Bob Clark auditioned over 8,000 children from around the world to find the perfect Ralphie. Peter Billingsley was actually the very first kid to audition, and Clark was immediately impressed. Bob Clark later recalled that Billingsley walked in, and he had us from the beginning because of his natural, engaging delivery and effortless charm. But even though Clark loved Billingsley right away, he thought the choice was too obvious and proceeded to audition about 8,000 more kids just to make sure. Billingsley was already 12 years old and familiar to audiences from his role as Messy Marvin in Hershey's chocolate syrup commercials and from co-hosting the TV series Real People. He had also played an orphan on Little House on the Prairie. Despite having all this experience, Clark still made him wait through thousands of other auditions before finally giving him the role. Clark wanted to be absolutely certain he had found the right child to carry the entire movie. After seeing thousands of kids from everywhere, Clark kept coming back to that very first audition. Billingsley's combination of innocence, humor, and relatability made him the perfect choice to play young Ralphie Parker dreaming of his Red Ryder BB gun. Fact 18. A Christmas Story was made on a modest budget of approximately $4 million, and director Bob Clark even invested $150,000 of his own money to help fund it. Clark waived his director's fee and put his own cash into the production because he believed so strongly in the project. Getting the film made had been difficult, and he had spent years trying to convince studios to produce it. Clark had heard John Shepherd's stories on the radio back in 1968 and had been working for 12 years to turn them into a movie. Studios weren't interested in a small Christmas movie about a kid wanting a BB begun. The modest budget meant the production had to be very careful with expenses. They couldn't afford real Lifebuoy soap for the punishment scene, so they used wax instead. They had to make tough choices about what could be done practically versus what had to be cut. The production filmed in Cleveland specifically because of Higbee's department store, which was the only department store willing to participate in the film. The store's vice president, Bruce Campbell, agreed to let them film there on the condition that he could edit the script for cursing. Clark's personal investment and dedication to the project shows how much he cared about bringing Shepard's stories to life, even though nobody expected it to become a beloved classic. Fact 19.
Over the years, I got to be quite a connoisseur.
The bright red Lifebuoy soap that Ralphie has to keep in his mouth after swearing was actually made of wax because the production couldn't afford real soap. Director Bob Clark specifically chose the Lifebuoy brand because he knew from his own childhood experience that it tasted absolutely terrible. He wanted the scene to feel authentic even though they used a wax substitute instead of actual soap. Lifebuoy was one of the most popular brands of soap in America from the 1920s through the 1950s, so having it appear in a film set around 1940 made perfect historical sense. The brand was known for its distinctive red color and absolutely horrible taste. Parents of that era commonly washed their children's mouths out with soap as punishment for cursing, and Lifebuoy was notorious for being particularly unpleasant. Peter Billingsley's acting during the soap punishment scene was so convincing that everyone watching believed he really had disgusting soap in his mouth. His facial expressions and the way he talks around the bar of soap sold the scene perfectly. In Ralphie's fantasy afterward, he imagines going blind from soap poisoning, which shows just how traumatic the punishment felt to him. The wax substitute allowed Billingsley to safely keep it in his mouth for multiple takes without actually suffering. Fact 20. In one of the most frustrating production ironies ever, the filmmakers spent enormous amounts of money creating fake snow in Cleveland, and then a real blizzard hit right after they finished. The production brought in massive snow machines and spent roughly 24 hours manufacturing the winter wonderland seen on screen. They ran the machines all night with permission from the neighbors so everything would be covered in beautiful white snow for filming. The crew mixed soap suds with now banned carcinogenic firefighting foam and pumped it through giant wind machines to create realistic snowdrifts and falling snow. It was an expensive and time-consuming process that required tons of equipment and manpower. Right after they finished covering everything in expensive fake snow, Cleveland got hit with an actual blizzard that blanketed the area in real snow. The production had to scramble to figure out how to deal with the real snow mixed with their expensive fake snow. It must have been incredibly frustrating to spend all that money and effort creating artificial snow, only to have nature provide the real thing for free immediately afterward. Despite this costly timing mishap, the film turned out beautifully, and the snow scenes look perfect. Sometimes, that's just how movie production goes. A Christmas Story went from complete box office bomb to holiday classic watched by millions every year. It's crazy how a movie that almost nobody saw in theaters became such an important part of Christmas tradition. Which fact shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more.